prominent DJ and founder of Cliff Central, wrote a letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Basically, Gareth Cliff is hurtful of the lockdown. It didn't go down well, many people lashing him for maintaining the relations of privilege in South Africa. He's white, of course. Was this his privilege talking? Gareth Cliff joins us now. Why are you writing letters to the president? He's a busy man, you know.
I've been writing these open letters for, I think it's 12 years now. In fact, the first one, which was to then President Zuma, was around the state of education and power cuts, which were already happening when Alec Irwin was our Minister of Public Enterprises all those years ago. And it comes back to haunt me or to bedevil me every couple of months. I see someone else passing it around as if it's new. I don't know. I mean, Redi, I think we've all got, how do you know you're free? You're free if you can speak out and talk to people in power about the things that worry you, the things that concern you, the things that interest you. And to be silent is as good as to be in shackles.
What did you think you needed to speak out against? I mean, we're in a lockdown because of a pandemic that we didn't choose. Why did you feel the need to speak out?
Well, I think the lockdown is a bad idea. I think that regardless of how many lives are lost, and that's obviously not something that anyone wants, the fact that the entire economy has been put on hold and possibly won't recover for years, as far as economists that are much wiser than I am on the subject are saying. We may have plunged more people into poverty, potential starvation, unemployment, than will die from COVID-19, and perhaps the livelihoods of so many South Africans who were already teetering on the brink. You know, we had incredible unemployment before this. Now they're going to find themselves in a really awkward and difficult position as a result of the government decision, not of the disease.
Let's bring in Jamil Khan to this conversation. He speaks and writes about race and identity. He's a social commentator and academic. He joins us now. So, Jamil, people like yourself, are you getting it? Gareth says it's all about the economy.
You know, I feel it's always been very interesting to me how we speak about the economy as some sort of pre-existing cosmic force that we all have to submit and yield to. I understand that it's a very real thing, but this is something that's controlled by a group of people very deliberately. I wish we would speak more about challenging the power structures that actually set economies up in the way that they are set up.
What do you make of what Gareth says, that we are losing hope, we are losing patience? Is that something you identify with?
No, I mean, I'm by no stretch of the imagination somebody who finds themselves at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to privilege in South Africa. But I don't know who the we is, because, and also losing hope in what now only, because I think as a country, South Africa has historically given, especially impoverished Black people, very little to hope for. So to come to the realization that we are now losing hope because of a lockdown is a little bit late.
We'll come to that in just a moment, your response in just a moment, Gareth. But I just want to show this image of what happened in suburban South Africa in the early days of a lockdown. People found creative ways to continue interacting with their neighbors versus the people in the township. There we go. There's a braai, a barbecue, if you're watching us from other parts of the world, neighbors across each other, social distancing, plenty of meat, quiet streets, nice life. Compare this to people in their homes, in the township, not even being safe there, with bloodthirsty, if you ask me, police and SANDF members brutalizing them and threatening them in their own homes and yards. So, Gareth, haven't seen that perspective. We are losing hope. We are losing patience. Who's losing hope and who's losing patience?
Well, I don't know if you're trying to frame this as a discussion about equality, because that's certainly not what I said in my introductory remarks. I made it very clear that I'm not talking about some concept of social engineering called the economy. And I reject that concept out of hand. I think the free market has made more people in the world self-sustaining, employed, busy, capable of buying their children the right education, clothing, food, sustenance. This is about lifestyle. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the social constructivist nonsense which is being taught in humanities departments of universities by people who will shortly find themselves even less employed than they were during what was called an economy. You cannot disregard these things and throw them out because you have a theory about how society is constructed. The economy is a very real thing. If you do not have employment and you don't contribute value to that economy, you don't get rewarded. Even in countries like China that profess to be socially constructed, that profess to be communist, they are countries that have they've been forced to kowtow to the idea of the free market. We're no different. And that's the free market is the most incredible engine for determining what price something should be, because it includes the intelligence.
But hold on, Gareth. I mean, you mentioned China. You mentioned there are lots of countries that were nearly brought to their knees because of COVID-19. You say the economy is a real thing. I don't think anyone can debate with you on that one, can disagree with you on that one.
It sounded
but
like
the
it
point
in the
is,
beginning.
when you say things like many of us, what did you say? That many of us aren't afraid of the virus anymore. It's our health and we'll take our chances. Thank you. Who will take their chances? People who are offering essential services, who are working at grocery stores, they don't have a choice. They travel by taxis. They live in densely populated areas. Are you saying those are the people who should die for this economy? People will die, right? As they have in those countries that you mentioned.
There's nobody who could in good conscience say that they'd be happy with any death at all. But to immediately try to characterize people who are saying there is another dimension to this, which is an economic dimension, which may result in far more hardship and difficulty for people, and to try and characterize those people as evil or only interested in money is outrageous. It's also a mischaracterization
Jamil,
which borders on caricature.
Jamil, what do you say to that?
It wasn't long ago when the president made the announcement that the economy will open in a phased fashion. So the intention to do that and to get this economy going again is there, and it has already started.
You believe everything he tells you? Do you remember why we decided to go into lockdown? It was to create a flattening of the curve so that we could prepare ourselves in terms of medical facilities and medical staff. That has happened now. Why are we still in lockdown?
What do you think is going to happen if people are just allowed to carry on with their lives and go? The point about the virus is also not, or spreading the virus.
You're not stopping infection.
The point about it,
Jamil, finish your point.
The point about it is not you protecting yourself from the virus, is you protecting other people from yourself, because you don't know whether you have it or not. So the point about allowing people to go out into the world without any form of caution is inevitably going to cause that spread to increase.
And when lockdown happens, that's going to happen anyway.
True that we haven't reached full capacity as far as testing is concerned. I mean, that is a fact. Community-based spread, we haven't reached full capacity. So can we know?
No, we've hardly done any tests at all. This is going to happen now when lockdown ends, whether it ends tomorrow or whether it ends in June or whether it ends in September. There are going to be the same number of deaths. All that the lockdown is doing is it's just flattening that curve for longer. So it's a question of time. You're not preventing more people from dying. That's not what the lockdown's ever been proposed to do. And it hasn't done so in any country in the world.
What must happen now, Gareth? You just want us from today, get in our cars, privilege, cars, others
don't put words in my mouth, please.
What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do?
No, Redi, there are people in society who are especially at risk. Now, we're learning things through the course of this, and I'm not a doctor, but it's clear in countries all over the world that the people most at risk are old people, fat people, and people who have pre-existing comorbidities like immunocompromised systems, which we have a lot of in this country. Those people need to be extra cautious. But the rest of us need to get back to work and develop herd immunity. Keep those people who are vulnerable safe. You have your economy, you have your own money to look after and your health. You can decide which one you need more.
Okay, Jamil, I just want to play this visual of people just queuing for food, and we've seen that over and over again. It's not just Moy Plus. This is the typical picture in urban South Africa, in rural South Africa, Lusikisiki. We've seen similar images. So, Jamil, does Gareth have a point here that people are already out? They're out there trying to get food. It's much harder to get food. It's much harder for these people under lockdown than it otherwise would have been. What do you say?
I can appreciate that point, and it's obviously very clear to see that the execution hasn't been perfect, and it hasn't been in cases like this. Of course, this is contradicting the very point about the lockdown, and those are things that need to be addressed. But this concept of herd immunity, I mean, I would like to hear a list of people that Gareth is willing to see die for the
that's outrageous. I mean, can you imagine me asking you that question in reverse? That's outrageous.
But exactly, so how can you say that everybody must just catch the
a list of people who I'd like to see dead? Are you out of your mind? What kind of position is that to take in a serious debate? Are you intellectually bankrupt to ask such a question of another person?
The point is to say to people that everybody just needs to basically take their chances, and in saying that, people will die. It's easy for you
Jamil,
to say that when you don't have to consider.
You take your chances Jamil, I don't know what you do for a living, but every day you take a chance when you get into a car or a form of public transport. Every day when you walk out of your house, you take a risk. Don't tell me that this is any greater or lesser a risk. The death rate's less than 1%.
When you get in a car, of course, dangerously driving, you endanger other people's lives. That whole argument is also going on in the Republican Party in the United States as well. It's about the transmission, the mode of transmission of the virus. People are far more vulnerable to your being out there than they otherwise would be to you on an ordinary day just getting out of there. But Gareth, just bringing you back to what you're saying, that many of us aren't afraid of the virus anymore. It's our health, and we'll take our chances. Thank you. We don't know whether the majority of people feel that way. We look for government to lead, not that we are complacent as citizens, but they've got to come up with policies and actions that protect the most vulnerable in society.
You just showed us visuals of people who are giving exactly the point of view that I have expressed. They are out there getting food parcels because they're desperate. They've decided, to hell with whatever health responsibilities the government says I have towards others or myself. I need to eat. Now, we can sit here and philosophize.
But are we at the same position? We've got choices, don't we? They don't have a choice. They're hungry now. So where do they go? The streets.
But this is precisely my point. And we're giving them less and less choices by shutting down the economy and preventing them from earning money, preventing them from being able to live, to do their own thing, to find a way to make themselves a part of society. We're forcing people to live in one-bedroom shacks in informal townships. Are you kidding me? For a month and a half now? That's outrageous. It's callous beyond belief, and it borders on inhumane.
Jamil, now here we are. Gareth is talking about the poor. Jamil, do you accept Gareth is championing the cause of the poor here?
First of all, I don't know what really was that great about an economy that is predicated on a system that exploits the labor of vulnerable people for the benefit of powerful people. You, Gareth, are one of those powerful people who, whatever wealth it is that you have currently in your possession, is as a consequence of the exploitation of the people that you are saying you care about. And it is what
I'm
you
exploiting
have inherited.
Hold on a second, you petty socialist. Who am I exploiting? Who am I exploiting? Give me a list of those names. At least that isn't a list of names of people I want dead.
I think he's talking more about the structural nature of
no such thing.
For many people
I own
to
my
advance,
own business.
It's predicated on people's
I own my own business. I'm employing people. If anything, I've given those people an opportunity to do things they wouldn't have had a chance to do if there wasn't a cliffcentral.com.
You owe them those things.
Who am I exploiting, Jamil? Give me a name.
Does every person who's well off or in the suburb exploiting the poor?
I'm terribly sorry. He's not well informed about anything. And to allow this nonsense, which is completely theoretical, about how social structures have enabled the exploitation of workers. I mean, this is Marx without any understanding of the last 150 years since he died. It's outrageous that you're
life. Jamil, I don't know.
To spew this nonsense. Who am I exploiting, Jamil? Give me an answer.
Okay, let him answer. You asked him a question, let him answer. Jamil?
You honestly think that this is about giving you a list of people and names that you have exploited? I am talking about.
You asked me for a list of people I'd like dead.
I'm talking about the way in which a system is set up to place certain people in positions of privilege and others in positions of disadvantage. That is by no coincidence, and it is deliberately set up that way. So, again,
By
this is not
whom?
about giving
Who
you a
set
list of
that up?
names.
I haven't been in
Finish
any
your point,
meetings with the Illuminati recently, Jamil.
No,
but
that's
as far
because
as
you
I
haven't
can tell-
because you haven't been alive. You weren't alive during colonialism, Gareth. Obviously, however, today you sit there with being a beneficiary of the legacy that system has left. You think that system was about giving people jobs and making them feel good about
Okay,
themselves?
I need to
at the
just
end
hear
of the
this.
day?
This
Okay.
this is the nonsense
Okay,
of the
I missed
politics
it.
of resentment. And I'm not going to be part of this. You don't know anything about me, Jamil. You haven't been able to say one thing that pertains especially to my life here. If I write a letter about the things that concern me as a citizen in this country, I shouldn't be attacked because of whom I say I'm speaking on behalf of. What if I'm just speaking on behalf of myself? Is that not good enough?
Maybe it's
I'm
because you
not
said
trying to champion.
Gareth.
Well, I
Hey,
mean,
Gareth,
we
isn't it
as South
because
Africans.
when you said we,
Okay,
so
is
you were
that the
talking
problem
about
then? So
certain
if I
types
go
of
back,
people, some people.
so if I go back and I edit the letter and I change it to I, is it still a problem?
Is it Jamil?
Maybe
I
less
mean,
so. But
okay.
the point about the letter is being very clear about the fact that you are protesting the conditions that you find yourself in and what the impact
No,
that has on you, because
no,
the way in
So there was a
not
universality
true.
the
to
impact
that
of this
letter.
pandemic is
Not true. You haven't
distributed
read my
across
letter.
society is not the
You
same.
didn't read. You didn't even go to the trouble of
Okay,
reading the
let me
letter.
move.
The opening
Let me just move to
paragraph is
something
not
else,
about
Gareth.
me. I spoke about police brutality. I spoke about people locked in townships. I didn't speak of me, Jamil. Those are not my stories. I'm co-opting stuff from the news, which has just been shown by Redi.
So who's the we?
South Africans,
There
are we
were a
not
lot of
allowed to
we's,
consider
but
ourselves citizens under an enforced
Okay.
lockdown? I mean, Jamil, who do you speak on behalf of when you write nonsense?
I do want to read this part. You say, Gareth, that when you promise something and then break that promise, it makes us feel like we should break your regulations in return. So, Gareth, what did you mean by that? Are you inciting people?
Sure, Redi, I'm the one who's going to start a revolution from my own backyard. Don't be ridiculous. I mean, I know that you're certainly not. You may be looking for a debate in this, but you know that I'm not going to go out there with pitchforks and fire torches to the union buildings to demand that President Ramaphosa ends the lockdown. This is a letter from a concerned citizen. I can't believe it gets the opprobrium that it does from people who just aren't. They're not capable because they lack courage. They won't stand up and say this themselves. I've received innumerable emails from people who agree with me. I've seen tons of support on social media, and I've seen, yes, some criticism from the social justice warriors and the leftists like Jamil. But these are people who've never contributed to society in any meaningful way. And the reason they talk like that is because they need these systems and structures to blame for their own inadequacies. They've never built anything. And it's exactly those people who complained about me on social media too. Angry, broken people who have no place in society to begin with because they haven't been able to find anything.
Everybody has a place in society. Well, everybody has a place in society, Gareth, and isn't that the problem?
I'm talking about in the economy.
Yeah?
I'm talking about in the economy. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for writing a letter to the president, which comes from a good place. I was polite. I'm not trying to start an insurrection. I'm complaining about things that are going to affect, I believe, many South Africans. Now, I can only write from my point of view. And if that point of view is too privileged for people like Jamil to enjoy, then don't read my letter. But don't find fault with it. Write your own.
Jamil to respond to this. Jamil, what do you say?
I did the construction of this personal attack. You wrote a letter, you put it out into the public. People have a right to respond to that letter. You are not willing to understand that the positionalities that you hold as a white male in South Africa mean certain things.
Oh, here we go. Identity politics 101.
Hold on, Gareth. You asked, let him finish.
And this is exactly the point, right? You haven't let either one of the other people on this panel speak without interrupting them because you feel entitled to do that based on your positionality. The point is, you haven't reflected enough on just what that kind of positionality provides for you, and the fact that you even have the voice in the first place to write that letter. So where was this concern before? Because besides having a COVID pandemic, South Africa was in need of this kind of activism from people like you a long time ago. So
I was there 10 years ago.
Advocating for what?
I wrote letters then. It's nothing new. This is not something I've just suddenly started doing, Jamil.
The point is, Gareth, you are in a position of power and privilege. The thing that you call for people to do, or the thing that you point to when you say if you don't do this, we will break your lockdown. The consequences for doing that are very different for you as it is for people like the people we saw in that video queuing for food. So when you talk about being concerned for South African citizens, you also have to consider that in itself is not a monolithic concept. You being a South African citizen doesn't mean the same thing as me being a South African citizen. And the consequences for asserting that South
to say the consequences of breaking a lockdown, we've already seen there's a man who died, was killed in Alexander. He was in a yard next door. He was found with alcohol. We've seen people out to buy food and they're being victimized by the police. So the consequences of basically revolting or hitting back against government for the lockdown are very different for you versus people out in the townships. Do you accept that?
It's rapidly approaching 10,000 people who've now been arrested for breaking lockdown. And we've got just over 100 deaths. I think that tells you the whole story. This has actually got very little to do with this disease. And, you know, if anything, you're right. Maybe I do have a position of power and privilege, but then it's all the more my duty to say what I think and to do what I say, not only because I might be speaking on behalf of other people or just for myself, but also, Jamil, because that's my definition of integrity. How do you know you're free? You're free if you can say what you really think and do what you say. And that's the same as integrity to me. And I'm not going to change that, no matter how much reflective time you give me. I think it's absolutely essential that we have these arguments and debates, and I'm happy to be corrected where I'm wrong. But the fact of the matter here is that this lockdown is going to have wide-ranging, devastating consequences for so many South Africans, and everybody's obsessed with the present problem rather than the long-term one. And I'm being criticized as it like some kind of poster boy for this situation, when there are lots of people who believe that the government has handled this quite badly.
Well, you wrote a letter and you're a public figure, so that's why we're engaging you. So, Gareth, if President Ramaphosa listens to you and ends the lockdown and does all the list of things that you say he should be doing, and the consequences are more devastating for the people that Jamil is speaking about, will you come back on the show and say you were wrong?
Of course I will. I've admitted I'm wrong a lot of times, Redi. That's part of being, you know, an intelligent creature on Earth. You have to admit when you've made mistakes. And I have got it wrong before, but I've also got it right before. And I'm concerned that people are only looking at this from the point of view of health. And the economy is not some boogeyman that picks and chooses winners and losers. What it is a system where everybody gets a fair shot. If you're a shebeen owner, right now you're suffering. If you're someone who is working as a domestic worker, right now you're suffering. If you're someone who works in the mines, right now you're suffering. Those are not privileged, powerful people who are desperate to be part of the economy. They just want to get their job done so they can bring home some money and feed their families. That villainizing someone like me because of that argument is a rational take on this whole thing. It just seems to me like a complete overreaction, just like the reaction to this pandemic.
Jamil, last thoughts, last word. What do you want to say?
Gareth, it's absolutely not true that everybody gets a fair shot. It's absolutely not true. We know that people are excluded from this economy because of the very identity politics that you look down upon. We know that people do not get employed because they are black. We know that people do not get employed because they are disabled. We know that people don't get employed because they are queer. So the position about the economy that you want us to return to, that it is inherently fair, is a lie. It's an absolute lie. So if anything, I understand very well that the economy is not going anywhere. Whether I want it to exist or not, it will. However, if anything can come out of this, then it's an opportunity to revise what this idea of an economy is and how it operates. Because ask anybody that's not you, they will tell you it is not fair and it is not equal. And if this pandemic
We'll leave it there.
is what it takes if this pandemic is what it takes to make us revise that and relook at that so that it can actually be that, then maybe something good could come out of your suggestion.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you both for being so generous with your time. Let's continue the debate and see what South Africans have to say. Jamil Khan and Gareth Cliff. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Redi.